You laughed at the party. You said all the right things. You smiled when you were supposed to smile. And the second you got home, you sat in your car in the driveway for 11 minutes. Just breathing. Just decompressing. Not because anything went wrong. Because everything went right, and it still drained you to nothing. If that sounds familiar, stay with me for the next 20 minutes. Because what you're about to hear might explain years of confusion about who you actually are. Not who you performed. Who you actually are underneath the performance. Let's start with the scene. His name doesn't matter. Call him Daniel, or call him yourself, because this happens to almost everyone watching this right now. Daniel has friends. Good ones. He goes to dinners. He replies to texts, mostly on time. At work, people describe him as friendly, easy to talk to, not shy at all. If you asked his co-workers whether he was an introvert, they'd laugh. Daniel? No way. He's the one who organizes the office birthday parties. He's the one who remembers everyone's coffee order. But here's what nobody sees. Daniel spends his Sunday nights rehearsing conversations he's not even sure will happen. He replays things he said 3 days ago, wondering if they landed wrong. He loves his friends deeply, but after a 2-hour hangout, he needs 2 days to feel like himself again. And when his phone buzzes with a call, his stomach tightens before he even sees who it is. Daniel is not shy. Daniel is not antisocial. Daniel is not broken. Daniel is an introvert who never got the memo. And there's a very good chance you are too. Here's the thing almost nobody tells you. Introversion was never about liking people or hating people. It was never about being quiet in a room or loud at a party. That's the cartoon version, the one from movies and personality memes. The real definition is so much simpler and so much more personal. It comes down to one question. Where do you recharge? Extroverts recharge by being around others. The energy of a room fills them up. The noise, the eye contact, the back and forth, it feeds something in them. Introverts recharge alone. Being around others, even people they love, spends energy like a battery draining. It doesn't matter how good the conversation was. It still costs something. That's it. That's the whole difference. Everything else is just decoration built on top of that one simple truth. Which means you can be talkative and still be an introvert. You could be the funniest person in the group chat and still need 3 days of silence to feel human again. You can love deeply, connect easily, remember birthdays, show up for people without being asked, and still feel like you're performing a version of yourself that isn't quite real, one that has to be put away at the end of the night, like a costume folded neatly and hung back in the closet. So before we get into the signs, I want you to do something. Take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, ask yourself one honest question. When was the last time you felt completely, fully like yourself? Not the polished version. Not the version that answers texts quickly and shows up on time and says the right thing at the right moment. The real one. Hold that answer in your mind. We're going to come back to it. Now, let's talk about the signs. The real ones. The quiet ones. The ones you've probably felt your whole life without ever having a name for them. Sign 1. You feel tired after socializing, even when you had fun. This confuses people the most. How can something you enjoyed leave you feeling wiped out? But joy and energy are not the same thing. You can have a wonderful time and still spend your reserves doing it. Think of it like this. Extroverts plug into people. Introverts unplug from people to recover. It's not that the time wasn't good. It's that connection, even the beautiful kind, takes something out of you that only solitude can put back. Imagine a phone at 80% battery. You use it all day, texting, scrolling, taking calls. By evening, it's at 10%, even though nothing went wrong. It simply did what phones do. It spent energy doing its job. Your social battery works the same way. A great conversation is still a conversation. It still uses power. And when the room empties out, you're left plugging yourself back into the wall, alone, in silence, waiting to climb back up to full. Pause here for a second. Think about the last time you had a genuinely good night out. Now, think about how you felt the next morning. Refreshed or hollow? Full or scraped clean? That answer tells you more about yourself than any personality quiz you've ever taken. Sign 2. You rehearse conversations in your head before they happen. You mentally practice what you'll say to the cashier. You draft texts before you send them. sometimes typing and deleting the same sentence 4 or 5 times. You imagine how a phone call might go and prepare for 3 different versions of how the other person might respond, just in case. This is an anxiety for no reason. It's your mind trying to protect you from the exposure of spontaneous interaction, because spontaneous interaction, for you, doesn't feel safe. It feels like standing on a stage with no script, in front of an audience you didn't agree to perform for. Extroverts think out loud. The words arrive as they speak them, live, unfiltered, and that's fine for them because speaking doesn't cost them the way it costs you. Introverts think and then speak. That gap between thinking and speaking, the one that makes you seem quiet or hesitant or slow to respond, isn't a flaw. It's depth. It's you processing before you perform, choosing your words the way someone chooses their footing on ice, carefully, deliberately, because a wrong step feels like it matters more than it probably does. Sign 3. Small talk feels like physical labor. Not because you dislike people, because small talk asks you to be present without depth, and depth is where you actually live. You can talk for hours about something that matters, about a book that changed how you see things, about a fear you've never told anyone, about a dream you had that shook you awake. But how about this weather can drain you in 90 seconds flat? That's not social anxiety, at least not entirely. That's your nervous system telling you it wasn't built for shallow water. It was built for the deep end, and every second spent treading in the shallow end feels like wasted energy you'd rather spend on something real. This is why introverts often get accused of being intense or too serious or making things heavier than they need to be. It isn't that you're trying to be heavy. It's that light conversation, the kind that skims the surface and never goes anywhere, feels like static in your ears. You'd rather sit in silence with someone than talk about nothing with them. Sign 4. You've been called quiet your whole life, even in rooms where you have a lot to say. Here's a painful truth. Quiet doesn't always mean you have nothing to say. Sometimes it means you're waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right depth of conversation to say it. But the world doesn't wait. The world moves on to the loudest voice in the room. And you learn early that your thoughts, however good, however sharp, however worth hearing, often arrive a few seconds too late to be heard. So you stop saying them out loud. You start saying them only to yourself, in the privacy of your own mind, where no one can interrupt you or talk over you or move on before you've finished forming the thought. And over time, people start believing you don't have much going on inside. Teachers pass you over for the raised hands in the front row. Group projects assign you the quiet tasks because someone else is louder about wanting to lead. Friends assume you're fine because you're not the one bringing up problems first. And somewhere in there, a quiet ache begins to grow, the ache of being underestimated by people who never actually asked what was going on underneath your silence. That is one of the loneliest misunderstandings a person can carry. Being full of thoughts and being read as empty. Sign 5. You need alone time like other people need food. It's not a preference. It's a requirement. Skip it, and you start to feel irritable, foggy, disconnected from yourself like static on a radio station that used to come in clear. This is where a lot of introverts feel guilt they were never supposed to feel. You cancel plans to protect your peace, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers that you're being difficult. Antisocial. Too much. Selfish even. You're not too much. You're simply requesting the one thing your mind actually needs to function properly. Nobody apologizes for needing sleep. Nobody feels guilty for eating when they're hungry. Solitude, for an introvert, works the same way. It isn't a luxury. It's maintenance. It's the quiet, unglamorous work of keeping yourself intact. And yet, how many nights have you canceled plans and immediately started apologizing in your head, rehearsing the excuse you'd give if anyone asked, even though the truth, "I just need to be alone tonight," should have been enough on its own. Sign 6. You overanalyze social interactions long after they're over. The conversation ended hours ago, maybe days ago, but still playing in your head on a loop with commentary running underneath it like subtitles you never asked for. Did that sound weird? Did they think I was rude? Why did I say it that way instead of this way? Why did they pause before answering? Was that pause about me? This is an insecurity for no reason. It's a side effect of a mind that processes everything deeply, including things that don't deserve that much processing power. Your brain treats a slightly awkward pause in conversation the way other people treat an actual problem to solve, running it through analysis, searching for the meaning behind it, refusing to let it go until it finds an explanation that fits. Exhausting, yes, but also a sign of how much you care about being understood correctly. Which brings us to something uncomfortable but important. People who overthink conversations aren't careless people. They're some of the most thoughtful people you'll ever meet. They just spend that thoughtfulness on themselves instead of showing it to the world, running quiet audits of their own behavior that no one else will ever see or know about. Sign 7. You'd rather write it than say it. Texting instead of calling. Emailing instead of meeting. Writing this comment instead of saying it out loud to someone's face. Why? Because writing gives you something real-time conversation never can. Time to think. Time to choose your words. Time to protect the parts of yourself that feel too raw for an unscripted exchange, where you don't get a second chance to phrase something the right way. This is why so many introverts are surprisingly good writers, or find themselves saying things in messages that they'd never managed to say in person. The words were always there. They just needed a slower door to walk through, one where nobody was watching your face while you searched for the right sentence. Think about the last time you wrote a long, honest message to someone, one that took you 20 minutes to get exactly right, and then imagine trying to say that same thing out loud, live with no delete button. For a lot of introverts, that thought alone is enough to explain why the message got sent instead of the phone call getting made. Sign 8. You can be the life of the party and still feel like an outsider in the room. This one catches people off guard. You can laugh the loudest. You can crack the jokes. You can be, by every outward measure, the most social person in that space, and still feel a strange, quiet distance from everyone around you. Like you're watching the moment happen instead of fully living inside it, standing just slightly outside your own body, narrating the scene instead of starring in it. That's not a contradiction. That's a performance. Some introverts learn to become excellent extroverts on demand, because the world rewards it, because it's easier than explaining yourself over and over again, because sometimes it's simply fun, and being good at something doesn't automatically make it effortless. But performing extroversion and being an extrovert are two very different things. One fills you up. The other one is borrowed energy, and eventually it has to be paid back in silence, usually alone, usually later, usually in a way nobody at that party will ever witness. Sign 9. You feel most like yourself when no one is watching. Alone in the car with the music up, walking with headphones in, reading in a quiet room while the rest of the world happens somewhere far away, muffled, distant, none of your concern for the next hour. In those moments, something in your chest loosens. You stop adjusting your face. You stop managing how you come across. You're just you, unfiltered, unobserved, unedited. If that version of you, the one nobody sees, feels more real than the version everyone else knows, that tells you something important. It tells you where your true self actually lives. Not in the room full of people admiring the performance. In the quiet after, when the performance is finally allowed to end. Now here's the twist. The one thing this video has been quietly building toward. None of these signs means something is wrong with you. For years, maybe your whole life, you've measured yourself against a world that rewards loudness, quick answers, constant availability, effortless small talk. And every time you didn't match that mold, some part of you quietly filed it away as evidence. Evidence that you were too sensitive, too withdrawn, too much in your head, not good enough at being around people. But you were never failing at being social. You were simply built differently. Extroversion isn't the default setting for a healthy person. It's just one setting among many, one wiring pattern out of several that are all equally normal, equally valid, equally capable of building a full and meaningful life. The world has spent decades treating it like the correct answer and treating introversion like a problem to fix, a shyness to overcome, a personality flaw to apologize for at parties and job interviews and family dinners. It isn't a flaw. It's a different way of processing the exact same world. Where an extrovert sees a party and feels alive, you see a party and feel the weight of 40 conversations you'll need to recover from. Where an extrovert speaks to think, you think to speak, carrying entire conversations inside your head before a single word makes it out loud. Where an extrovert draws energy from the crowd, you draw energy from the quiet after the crowd has gone home, from the empty apartment, from the silence that finally lets your shoulders drop. Neither way is better. They're just different wiring, running the same basic hardware, built for the same world, just experiencing it through a different set of settings. And here's the part that might sting a little, but needs to be said gently. If you've spent years forcing yourself to be loud in rooms that made you feel small, if you've apologized for canceling plans you knew would drain you, if you've called yourself antisocial for needing quiet the way other people need sunlight, you weren't protecting yourself from a weakness. You were protecting a part of yourself that the world never bothered to understand. Think back to Daniel, organizing parties, making people laugh, remembering coffee orders, sitting in his car for 11 minutes just to feel like himself again before walking through his own front door. He isn't broken. He isn't secretly failing at being a person. He's simply spending energy the outside world can see and refilling it in a way the outside world never gets to witness. Maybe that's you too. Maybe you've been calling yourself shy when the real word was always quietly waiting somewhere underneath. Introverted, not less social, not less capable, not less alive, just differently fueled, running on a different kind of power source than the people around you. Let's go back to that question from the beginning. When was the last time you felt completely, fully like yourself? If your answer involved being alone, or being with one person you trust completely, or sitting in silence with no one expecting anything from you, that tells you something worth sitting with. It tells you that your real self doesn't live in the crowd. It lives in the quiet. And there is nothing wrong with a self that prefers the quiet. So here's something worth thinking about tonight, long after this video ends. What would change if you stopped treating your need for solitude as a weakness and started treating it as information? Information about what actually restores you. Information about which relationships genuinely nourish you and which ones quietly exhaust you, no matter how much you care about the people in them. Information about the kind of life that would let you feel like yourself, not just some days, but most days. You don't need to become louder to be worth listening to. You don't need to fill every silence to be considered warm. You don't need to say yes to every invitation to prove you care. You don't need to explain, over and over again, why you left the party early, why you need a few days before you text back, why a quiet weekend at home sounds better than another night out. You just need to finally stop apologizing for how you're wired and start building a life that actually fits it. Because the version of you that shows up in the quiet, unwatched moments, the one that feels most real when no one else is around, that version deserves a life built around it too. Not just a version that performs for everyone else. Not just a version that shows up polished and available and endlessly agreeable while quietly running on empty underneath. If even one of these 9 signs felt like someone reached into your chest and read it out loud, you're not alone in this. There are more people sitting quietly with this exact feeling than you could ever imagine, all of them thinking they were the only one, all of them hiding the same 11 minutes in the car, the same rehearsed conversations, the same relief that comes from finally closing the door and being alone. You were never too much. You were never too quiet. You were never failing at being social. You were simply waiting for someone to tell you that the quiet version of you was allowed to exist out loud. If this helped you understand yourself a little more clearly, subscribe because there's more of this waiting for you, more quiet truth worth naming. Like this video if it felt like it was speaking directly to you. Share it with the one person who needs to hear that their quiet isn't a flaw, the friend who always leaves early, the sibling who never answers the phone but always shows up when it matters. And tell me in the comments which sign hit the hardest, because chances are you're not the only one who felt it. Sometimes the loudest form of self-understanding starts in the quietest place inside you. Let this be that place.